So I'm not going to introduce our speakers for this panel or in general, as we move ahead in the next week and a half and have more conversations like this with, local clergy and community leaders from different traditions. I'm not going to take the time to introduce everyone in great detail. Folks' bios are in the big packet of bios that you have, but I will say very briefly that I'm glad to be joined by Tom Dobbins, who works at Catholic Charities and is in charge of Justice and Peace.
I need to do that.
And Hanna Johnston is the community coordinator at a small church in Brooklyn, St. Lydia's, that we'll learn more about in a moment. We'll also be joined in a few minutes by Reverend Rivera, who is the director of the Latino Pastoral Action Council or Center, and very involved in a range of different, he's a pastor and also an activist on a number of levels in New York life. You can read more about their work and their communities in the packet of bios, but I do just want to flag a couple of things quickly, because one of the goals of all of these panel discussions that we'll have is to highlight at least a little bit of the diversity within every faith tradition, as we've just been talking about with Maury. There's no such thing as Christianity in the abstract. There's a lot of different Christianities that kind of jostle with each other. So we'll in this conversation get a sense of a few of the Christianities that make up, Christian life in New York now. I'm always really reluctant to put speakers or anyone else for that matter in like a kind of rigid box as though their perspective is totally defined by their denomination or their race or ethnicity or whatever. So I don't want to be too fixed or rigid about any of this, but that said, it is important that Tom has roots and his professional life within the Catholic tradition and within the church. Hanna and St. Lydia's are kind of loosely affiliated with the Lutheran and Episcopal churches and with kind of mainline liberal Protestantism, fair to say?
Yeah, we're a Lutheran congregation.
A Lutheran congregation, okay. But doing kind of creative stuff that's not, well, you'll see in a moment, it's not stereotypically, but liberal mainline Protestantism. And Ray Rivera, who'll join us in a moment, comes out of a Pentecostal church background and out of New York's also internally diverse Latino communities. So kind of different angles, and also on Sunday we'll visit a historically black Baptist church in Harlem. So another different angle on American Christian life and New York Christian life. Also, I should say really briefly, another really important element of diversity is that people play different roles, different forms of religious leadership. Ray Rivera will be here in a moment, is the only ordained clergy person on our panel. Hanna and Tom are lay leaders, but Tom working at a huge, like the largest social service organization in the country, I believe, and Hanna working at quite a small neighborhood church. So very different forms of religious leadership, which I think is a valuable aspect of this diversity as well. So all right, that's already way too much time from me. I've asked them each to talk for maybe 15 minutes-ish, which will then still leave us with at least a half an hour, maybe more, for questions and conversation afterwards. And I've asked Hanna to go first because she also has some cool stuff to show us on video. Yeah.
So it's really great to be here with all of you. I'm Hanna. As you might be able to hear, I'm not from around here, I'm from the UK. I moved here 3 years ago and I work at St. Lydia's, which is a Lutheran congregation in Brooklyn. And I'm going to start by showing you this 5-minute video clip, which gives quite a good introduction to the way that we worship, which is a little bit different.
One of the things I love most about St. Lydia's is that it's a big, still, and process of change. central act at St. Lydia's is to gather together around a meal and around a table. The idea is that when we're at this table together, there's a way in which we're practicing for how we like to be when we're out in the world. So it's a table where we learn how to feed one another and where we learn how to be fed. It's a table where we learn to be compassionate with one another and patient with one another. And it's a table where we learn to be open to God's presence and to spend time sort of feeling that movement and that presence in our lives.
We start our worship by gathering around the central candle and singing and then lighting it. And we all light our own candles on that one central candle and pass the fire from one person to the next. And then as we sing, we process to the tables and light all the candles on the tables. And by doing that, we all get to participate in marking this space as sacred.
So there's a story in the book of Luke that's about Jesus after the resurrection meeting two disciples on the road and they don't recognize him. And what happens is that they come together for dinner, and when they sit down at the table, Jesus breaks bread. And it says that he was known to them in the breaking of the bread, that in the moment that the bread broke, the disciples recognized Christ. And that's really the story that's at the heart of everything that we do together, that when we gather together at this table and when we break bread and share it, there's a sense that Christ is in our midst, and not only is Christ there with us at the table, but he's also present in each of us so that we can be Christ to one another.
Earlier in my life, I had an idea that going to church meant making certain proclamations and adhering to certain theories. But being at St. Lydia's and sitting down every week next to strangers, I found that in that moment, when I pass the bread and the bread is passed to me, that God is present and I feel connected to something bigger than myself.
And Jesus stands on the shore of the gray morning in the dawn, the same hour that he appeared to Mary Magdalene in the garden. Dawn, when the night is not quite over, but the day has not quite begun. He appears, inhabiting this in-between time when darkness and light are intermingled. His question to the disciples breaks my heart. Children, you have no fish, have you? And they answer him, no, we have been fishing all night and we haven't caught anything. When the catch comes in, it is more than they could have ever dreamed of, more than they could ever consume. And still, we are told, the net does not tear.
I think St. Lydia's appeals to people who maybe live far away from family, and either emotionally or geographically, and crave a home-cooked meal in the company of people who will accept them for who they are, no matter what they are.
So we finish our worship by everyone in the congregation helping to clean up all the food and the dishes and all the big mess that we've made. And that's one of my favorite moments in the service because I think there's a way in which you can kind of see the community that's been formed over the course of the evening, that when we came together at the beginning of the night, we were strangers to one another, and by the end of the night, we're friends.
I think that there's a big emphasis in our culture on the finished product, but I realized that I learned something from the process of making something, and that's really where the value is for me in being an artist. And I think that's true at St. Lydia's as well. By making church together every week, we learn about ourselves, and it doesn't really matter if the singing sounds perfect or if the food tastes perfect, or, you know, it really matters that we did it and that we wrestled with it for a while together.
Amen, amen, amen. Holy food for holy people. Share the meal.
Our founding pastor, and she's started the church in somebody's apartment 8 years ago, and it's grown to what it is today. We have about 85 regular congregants over dinner church, Sunday and Monday nights, and then we also do waffle church, which is once a month on a Sunday morning, and it's like a brunch church, and it's more to emphasise and raise up the participation and leadership of children and families. So we incorporated as a Lutheran congregation last year, and we are part of the ELCA, which is the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and we're over in Gowanus in Brooklyn. So that's a little bit about St. Lydia's history. We're also a progressive church and an LGBTQ affirming congregation, which is a very important value for us. And like you saw in the video, all of our services take place around the meal. And this really, more than anything, grew out of the specific culture of New York City. So it's a pretty hectic place to live. It can be quite inhumane on people sometimes here. And loads of New Yorkers live in tiny apartments and don't actually have a kitchen table. Like there just isn't room for that. And I moved here, like I said, 3 years ago from the UK. And one of the things that I've noticed since living here is just how little I cook at home anymore. In England, I would cook dinner most nights. I'd regularly have people over for dinner. I'd be invited to other people's houses for dinner. Here, that just doesn't really happen. Whether it's because of lack of space or long commutes on the subway or living with millions of roommates, like most New Yorkers meet over drinks in bars, restaurants, rather than around a home-cooked meal in somebody's home. And so I think for a lot of our congregations at St. Lydia's, that practice of coming together around a home-cooked meal every week is something really special. And especially for folks like me who live very far away from family, that connection around a home-cooked meal is important. And so this practice that we have of worshipping in the context of a meal is very theological, and it kind of shapes a lot of our values and the way that we do things. And so what I'm going to do is just talk you through a few different values that we have and the way that they shape our worship. So the first thing is that everything we do is very human, it's very bodily, and that is a deliberate thing and a theological thing. So it's rooted in the idea that bodies are good. And so we don't have a spirituality that is kind of somehow about like transcending bodies or floating off to become a soul or a spirit in some way. It's rooted in our humanity, it's rooted in our bodies. And so the first way that we acknowledge this is the fact that we feed ourselves during the service. We eat this meal together in the context of an act of worship. The other thing that was mentioned a little bit in the video is that we work together. So we create together and we work together. So the space is very artistic. We have a little storefront that our church meets in, and Rachel, who you saw on the video, she was our very first community coordinator, and she was also an artist, and she created some really beautiful things for our space, and we continue that tradition. But we also work together every time we meet by cooking the meal together or setting the tables, and then at the end, as part of the service, before we do the final prayer and the blessing, we all clean up together. And so that physical work together is very much part of our theology. The second thing is that we deliberately create space in the service. And we create space for people to share stories and for people to speak out loud their own prayers. And so at St. Lydia's, we always say that we share the sermon. So rather than just getting to hear one person's voice, the voice of the preacher, when the preacher has finished, we have a time where we invite multiple different congregants to share a story that might have been sparked by the Bible text that we read or by the words of the preacher. And this sermon sharing, it gives rise to what's another really important value for us, and that's ambiguity and dissonance. And so what will often happen in this sermon sharing time is that somebody might say something that they really disagree with what the preacher said for some reason. Or you might have two different congregants that each share a personal story that is very different or even conflicts or contradicts each other, but they're both based on the same text. Or you might have somebody say something that makes us feel like really challenged in our own personal beliefs and makes us doubt something that we've always believed. But after each of the sermon sharings, whoever is preaching simply says, thank you. So there's no attempt to sort of harmonise all these different voices, and there's no trying to force like different conflicting stories into agreement. It's okay to sit with that dissonance, to sort of hold both of the things in tension. And that's very, very deliberate. And I think this shows us, it demonstrates to us every week in worship a few different things. And one of them is that we don't know the answer to everything. We don't have everything figured out. And that's okay. And in our worship we have many different people participating. So we'll have different song leaders, different cooks, different people leading through the service, different preachers. And sometimes, especially if it's somebody's first time doing it, it can be a little bit imperfect. But again, that's kind of deliberate. It's not supposed to be a performance. That's part of the way St. Lydia's works. And the other thing it shows us is that doubt and doubting is an inherent part of faith, and it is literally demonstrated and lived out in the middle of the congregation every week. And it also shows us that everyone is different, and that there is not an expectation that one day suddenly we're all going to agree or we're all going to be on the same page. And so all of this dissonance really leads to the final value that I want to talk about, and that is discomfort. So what St. Lydia's isn't is a private supper club where a group of friends meet every week and have a nice dinner party. It could very easily become that very quickly, and every week we fight against that and try and keep ourselves turned towards the newcomer. And every week we sit down at the table next to strangers, or at least next to somebody that might be a bit strange. It's really a very mixed bag of people. And so we have quite a lot of young millennials. We have college students and artists and musicians and people that are trying to make their way in New York. We also have single parents and some older folks, some of whom have had some very difficult lives. And if you come to St. Lydia's, you might find yourself sitting next to somebody who has depression or anxiety, or somebody who just really struggles a bit with social interaction. You might end up sitting next to a whole youth group that are visiting from a Lutheran church in Minnesota and don't really know what they're doing there. Or you might be next to somebody who spent the night before on the street and maybe doesn't smell that good, or the way that they eat the food isn't very appealing. And so the conversation around the dinner table can be uncomfortable, can be a bit awkward, it can just take a lot of patience. But this experience of being in it together is very different from, for example, if you went to serve at a soup kitchen as a congregation, and you're kind of on one side of the line and you're serving people who are on the other side of the line. And instead, at St. Lydia's, we're all in it together. We serve each other, we eat together, we clean up together. And so in New York City, I think one of the things that people maybe are most hungry for is friendship and intimacy and connection, and also some silence and some stillness in the middle of a noisy, busy city. And so that's something that St. Lydia's can really offer. And personally for me, being part of St. Lydia's has shown me a different way to engage with my faith. I came from a very evangelical church background in the UK that was very much about the importance of what we believe. And there was lots of black and white and in and out and right and wrong. And at St. Lydia's instead, we emphasise what we practice rather than what we believe. And so that's probably the thing I love most about St. Lydia's, is coming back to that space again and again, like appreciating the liturgy and appreciating silence in a way I never have before. I'm an extrovert, so silence isn't really my thing, but growing in that appreciation for that and coming together with strangers every week and creating something beautiful. Thank you.
I also want to welcome Reverend Rivera. You missed introducing me briefly before, but he's made it through the West Side Highway to join us, so thank you. But I don't know, Tom or Reverend Rivera?
Yes, I'll go because I may have to leave early. I think I have a 1 o'clock in the Lower side, that's the East Village, and so, but I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, all right. We're finishing around 12:15, 12:20.
Yeah.
Should be fine.
Yeah, I have to confess I almost missed the meeting because of a heavy schedule, and I was reminded of the meeting just about 2 hours ago. So it's not that you're not important, it's just that there were just too many things on the plate these last 2 weeks. So I don't, my name is Ray Rivera, and I wear different hats, so this is an educational forum, but I'm president and founder of the Latino Pastoral Action Center, which is a 25-year-old ministry here in the city, and it's a Christ-centered evangelical, neo-Pentecostal, I'm a Pentecostal ordained minister, a liberationist social justice ministry. So that's a lot of synthesis in one introduction. And I'm also the chairman of the MICA Clergy table, which is an interfaith table here in New York City. I'm the co-chair with Pastor Michael Warren, and I'm a national chairman of the National Evangelical Latino Coalition, which is a network of 3,000 churches across the country. So, but as part of our ministry, I guess I'll focus on that since you're teachers at the Latino Pastoral Action Center. We have 4 congregations, one from Burkina Faso, which is a small emerging church plant. We also have a Ghanaian church plant, about 5 years old. We have the Latino African American congregation, which is about 15 years old, which is about 65% Latino, primarily Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Latin American groups. And the largest one, which is the Spanish language congregation, the Latino African American or second generation Latinos that worship with African Americans. So I have associate pastors involved. We have a 60,000 square foot complex on 170th Street in Jerome, the High Bridge section of the Bronx, that's the South Bronx. And there, beside the ministries, we have after-school centers, we have youth programs, we have alternative to incarceration, we have re-entry program for prisoners, and we have 3 community-grown charter schools, which that connects to kind of education. And notice the term I use, community-grown. That means they're organic to the community. They came out of the community-based organization. It's not the KIPS model or the success model, which I see them as external to the community. That's not to say that that's negative. We welcome everyone into our neighborhood in private schools. They want to do something, Catholic schools for inner city children. But our preference is community-grown. That's our brand, and community control. So let me talk a little bit about the Latino community. Latino community here in New York City is primarily made up of 5 major groups. Puerto Rican, which still is the largest. Dominican, maybe Dominican, very close now to the Puerto Rican group. Both of them almost have 1 million people each in New York City. Then the third group is Mexicans, and now growing Mexicans, and in Queens, Ecuadorians and Colombians. So those are kind of the 5 major groups, and most of them attend public schools. Most of them attend public schools. The demographics from a religious perspective, about 16%, 17% of Hispanics nationally, and I think that reflects New York City, maybe New York City a little more, 20% are evangelicals, which that's a nice way of saying they're really 90% Pentecostal. Evangelical just take credit for it, but really most Hispanic Protestants are Pentecostal. And even the mainline denominational churches that have Hispanic congregations, they tend to be neo-Pentecostal, except for some that actually homegrown, but a lot of the churches, if you look at the pastors that they've been able to recruit, since they haven't produced many Latino pastors themselves, they're usually Pentecostals that have left their traditions. So basically they have that Pentecostal.
Reverend, I know this is the absolutely impossible question to throw in limited time, but for people who don't have the background, could you give a very quick sketch of Pentecostal as opposed to other evangelicals?
Yeah, well, I guess if you talk to real hardcore classical Pentecostals, they'll say that the Pentecostal church was founded on the day of Pentecost. but of course, that's a very subjective perspective, perspective of Pentecostalism. But institutionally, you know, Pentecostal probably is a 19th century phenomenon. It comes out of the whole Azusa Street revival, which happened in California. A man named Seymour, and he was an African American, and he I came out of kind of holiness, quasi, I guess, Methodist traditions, and there was what they called an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, which theologically it developed into what they call the third work of grace, or second work of grace being sanctification, and now the third work of grace was the infilling of the Holy Spirit with the visible evidence being speaking in other tongues. So that theologically is what Pentecostalism is. It's kind of a third act of grace, Methodist being a second act of grace. You understand what theology, but that wasn't the phenomenon. At the same time that Azusa was happening, it was almost a worldwide thing, because in different Latin American countries you had this kind of universal, they claim, and there's some historical evidence outpouring of this phenomenon of speaking in tongues and this filling of the Holy Spirit. It was at a time when mainline denominationalism was very established. In Puerto Rico, the mainline churches actually divided Puerto Rico. The Presbyterian said, you take the south end, the Lutheran said, you take this end, and they actually began a missions strategic program. I teach this in one of the courses, but it didn't go very well. They grew, yes, to some degree, but it was the revivalism of Pentecostalism that became an explosion, and now maybe Puerto Rico is...
They say we'll take the whole thing.
and Puerto Rico maybe is this, anywhere 40% Pentecostal. Now it's just really blown up. All over Latin America, Pentecostalism is this phenomenon. And in communities of color, it took on an indigenous perspective. So the leadership was indigenous. So that's what it is versus other denominations. Again, in the 1970s, something else happened, which was the charismatic movement. And the charismatic movement had an impact on the Catholic Church and in mainline denominationalism. So now you've got all these mainline denominations, and you've had white people experiencing speaking in tongues and things of that sort. That's not to say that it didn't happen before, because there was some indigenous expression of whites in classical Pentecostalism. That's where you get the whole thing of the holy rollers, that phraseology. And I don't know if you've seen these documentaries of white people picking up snakes where they were snake handlers and all that. That was fringes of Pentecostalism, even in the historical Pentecostal sense. In the urban context, I was baptized and raised Catholic, and by Catholic I meant that I was what I call kind of a cultural Catholic, in the sense to be Latino is to be Catholic, because Spain conquered, right, under the Spanish Empire, wherever the crown went, the cross went also. So Latinos have had the creeds for 500 years, right, ever since 1492. So almost to be Latino synonymous with being Catholic from a historical, a cultural perspective. So I grew up Catholic in East Harlem. I'm born and raised here in East Harlem. And at the age of 15, I had a conversion experience within an indigenous Pentecostal church. And that began a new journey for me. at that time I thought I had discovered a new religion, but it really wasn't. It was just a continuation of what I had been brought up with, because later on, as I reflected theologically and went to school, I said I didn't start believing in the virgin birth when I was Pentecostal. I believed in the virgin birth when I was Catholic. I didn't believe in the Son of God. Jesus as the Son of God is Pentecostal. So the Apostle Creed really embodied most of what I believed in Pentecostal. I just didn't know it. But then it became if I was just the difference, I guess the experiential reality was different, because the focus on indigenous Pentecostalism was personal experience. And that kind of is the flavor of evangelicalism. You have a personal experience with Jesus Christ. You're born again. It doesn't become just liturgy. It isn't just tradition, but it's experiential, if I was to identify. And that's true in the charismatic wing of the Pentecostal church. And some evangelical wings, the focus is experiential. So that turned my life around. I was on the fringes of gang activity in East Harlem. Strong family, but still the environment did affect me. I had dropped out of high school. 6 months after my conversion experience, I was in a Bible Institute. That's like it's their infrastructure for colleges, because indigenous people are creative. Since the system marginalizes them, they create their own institutions that legitimatize their leadership. So there I was, 3 years. I graduated, and in the indigenous setting, you graduate, they put you to work right away. So I graduated when I was 18. At 19, this was an evening school. We didn't need a bachelor's to study theology. You could just go right in. So you didn't need, it wasn't the seminary criteria. And there, at 19, I started pastoring my first church. So I celebrated this year 50 years as a pastor. So in New York City. So there I was, 19. In our conference, they would send you, the way they tested it, you were really called, they send you to the worst church. So,
if you can make it through this, you're definitely called.
So that one for me was Sunset Park, Brooklyn. It was 12 members, made up of 3 families, and they were all feuding with each other. So it was a storefront church. I was there. It was a work tent ministry. They didn't have no money, so you had to work. And I'm going to date myself. It coincided with the war on poverty, Johnston's war on poverty. So my first job was as a community organizer. Don't worry, I'm not running for president. But it was as a community organizer, and there my theology grew out of that experience, because during the day I was organizing welfare recipients and telling them we can change the system now. We can impact the budget. So I was demonstrating, picketing, taking over welfare centers. But at night, because of the eschatological nature of my theology, you know what eschatology means? Eschatology means end times, the doctrine of end times, your view of end times. So in Pentecostalism, there's a very end time culmination of things. So it's God that's going to intervene and change everything. So in the morning and in the afternoon, I was telling the welfare recipients, we can change the system now, we can do it now. When now? And everybody, but at night I was telling the people, we gotta wait. We gotta wait for the Lord. We gotta wait for the Lord to come and intervene. And so I didn't even know the words then, but that produced kind of this duality in me and this existential tension, because what I was saying in the daytime didn't match with what I was saying at nighttime. So it made me feel that I needed to more learning. So I went to seminary. I went to NYTS. That time, a great theologian there named Bill Weber, and that began another journey in my theology. I'm an author of a book that talks about captivity theology, and I'll say a couple of more things about that, and I'll try to connect it to education, and I'll end. What I did was, after being in the Reformed Church I got to the Reformed Church somehow. I thought I was a great teacher. That little church had grown to 135 members in 6 years. and we bought our own building. So it spread that I knew how to make churches grow. Remember, this is 1970, this is the beginning of the church growth movement. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about if you're not in the religious world, but there's this whole thing of how do you make churches grow and strategies for making churches grow. And so they invited me as this consultant to this Reformed church because it was a dying church. The white people had fled to the suburbs. You know, it was just the opposite of what white people are doing today. They're coming back into America, you know, which is a good question for you all to raise. Why are they coming back? Okay, because then they were leaving. So then they all said, how can you come? You can make this church grow, and that brought me into the Reformed church. They said, do you have any ideas for us? So I gave them ideas, and then the board said, can you come and be the pastor? And I said, but I'm not Reformed, I'm Pentecostal. They said, we don't care as long as you make the church grow. You know, you can do whatever you want. So that was their commitment to theology. It really wasn't mission, it was institutional survival. There's a difference between mission and institutional survival. So I went in, that church grew. After 4 years, they gave me an opportunity to be the national executive for the RCA. That took me to places like Sioux Center, Iowa, Holland, Michigan. You know,
I'm sorry, I went to college in Iowa, and Sioux Center is not where Pentecostals go.
That's right.
that is Dutch Reform.
That's what I became part of. I became a minister of the Dutch Reform. So here I was preaching in agricultural communities with Reformed church people. I got to know them.
I ask not to pry too much, but speaking tongues is part of your
No, of course. Well, interesting, there was there was a neo-Pentecostal movement even within the Reformed church. There were a few churches that became charismatic, like Episcopalians. Everyone had their own little pocket of Pentecostalism.
But not in Iowa.
Not in Iowa. So I remember speaking at the Sioux Center Sioux Center, Iowa Center, but there's another place, Holland, Michigan, and there I was preaching 5,000 members, big church, because there the Reformed churches were the cathedrals and the Catholics were the storefronts. So that even blew my mind that our Reformed church was so good. This was a part of America I had never experienced. So I'm in Holland, Michigan. I'm preaching. In my ignorance, I said, can I make an altar call? Remember, I'm Pentecostal. He said, do what you want. He said, so I made an altar call. People came up. I started praying for them. And part of the thing was to stay at an elder's house. So I stayed at this little elder's house. He was 70. And he was Reverend Rivera. That was a good sermon. Boy, I remember that's like that old-time religion. And I'm glad you're not like those other Mexicans in town. And he said it, and I said, wow, did he really say that? Did he really say that? But you know, he was old, socially conditioned. I wasn't going to change his attitude. You know, he didn't understand that what he said was racist. It was just, you know, didn't have that type of consciousness. So,
Take just another minute or two.
all right,
I know we could go for another hour.
So anyway, I traveled throughout the Reformed Church. I was there 10 years in national leadership, building churches. Started out back, which is in the South Bronx, and just a couple of things in 2 minutes. There, I saw the children of color were not functioning well. The charter school law came out. Most politicians, friends of mine, because I'm a pastor activist, was against charter schools. They saw it privatizing education. Of course, unions were against it. I saw it different. I said, well, wait a minute. I can hire my own principal. I can hire my own teachers. I can have my own board. That sounds like community control to me. So I saw charters as community control. You see, I saw it as a way of controlling the educational process. So I started the first charter 15 years ago. Now we have three. One of our three schools is one of the highest performing schools in the whole state. 96 percentile English language learners, a Family Life Academy, and you can look it up on the website. We have three. So we outperform all of our schools, visionary leadership. It's community grown, it's organic to the community, and I guess you as teachers, you know, I have a lot of respect for you. My wife is a career educator. She did 30 years at the Board of Ed, and now she's been 10 years directing our charter schools. So what's the answer for the inner city kids in our community? I think it's a combination of visionary leadership, principals, teachers that are invested teachers with a sense of calling that I think probably you all have. So what we do, I commission teachers as urban missionaries. So I give teachers a religious calling beside their secular calling, because I believe teaching is a vocation. Vocation in the Greek means calling. So what I do is I tell teachers, and some of them that are open to it, I commission them as urban missionaries, that their reason for teaching is beyond the salary, beyond union benefits. It's really a calling, and those that want it, we legitimatize that calling by making them missionaries in the urban context. Of course, missionaries is a negative word for some people. I've redeemed that word. I'm not talking about the condescending, paternalistic, oppressive model of missions. I'm talking about missions in its true sense, aligned with God's plan, God's purpose. So that combination of organic relationships between our Community Development Corporation, which is Latino Pastoral Organization, our charter school organization, our spiritual organization. We have 4 corporations, and all of them are organic, and all of them separate corporations, but they're all organic. I built all of them, and they're all connected to each other. And we're trying to be light for those that come out of a Christian background, and salt as the Lord tarries. Still Pentecostal, still evangelical, still believe the Lord's coming, all that stuff. But until then, there's a lot of stuff to do. We can't just stand. They've been saying the Lord is coming for 2,000 years. And he hasn't come yet, So until then, what is the role of the church? What is the role of faith? And it's being engaged in all of the issues that are confronting our community. So I'll stop.
So Dr. and Reverend Rivera, thank you. I'm just going to share some materials here, and if you can pass those 2 down, Henry and you, and then Hanna, if you can pass these around. Okay. Just pass these around. As Henry had said, I am not, unlike Reverend Rivera, I'm not an ordained minister. My job is I am the coordinator of justice and peace activities at Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of New York. So in that role, what I'm called to do is I'm called to actually share the social ministries and social teachings of the Catholic Church to folks who actually both work for Catholic Charities and also to the pastors and to the parishes of the Archdiocese. And the Archdiocese currently is about 295 churches through 10 counties throughout New York State. And it's kind of interesting. The Catholic Church is separated. We're a little bit different because we have 3 counties in New York City. We have Staten Island County, Manhattan County, that we're in Bronx County. And then we actually go almost all the way up to Albany. It's a Sullivan and Ulster County. But Brooklyn and Queens are separate because Brooklyn and Queens, we kind of go back to the older model. There's a separate bishop for Brooklyn and Queens, and we're under the Archdiocese, of which Cardinal Dolan is the titular head here in New York City. And it's funny, what I'm sharing with you right now is actually some materials that we wind up using to be able to talk a little bit to people who work for Catholic Charities. Because Catholic Charities, what it tries to do is it tries to alleviate suffering of almost every human being, as my executive director says, throughout the city. And in an interesting way, I like what Reverend Rivera said about him commissioning teachers, because what we try to do in Catholic Charities is we, in a sense, try to commission our workers to be Masala, the ones that are going out and kind of alleviating some of the problems, some of the needs there. And I also like what Hanna said a little bit about practice versus belief, because at least in my role in Catholic Charities, like I said, I'm not a pastor, but what I do in trying to share the Catholic social teachings is something that's very pastoral. Okay, so I'm not pastoring, but I'm sharing kind of some of the pastoral teaching of the Catholic Church. And in a sense, that's what Catholic Charities tries to do. When we go out, we don't proselytize to people. We don't help people because they are Catholic. We try to help people because we are Catholic. Okay, and in a sense, what I'm doing with the first materials that we're going around, the first of those materials is the vision and the mission statement of Catholic Charities. And as you'll see, the first is very official, right? The first is the vision and mission statement of Catholic Charities. It has what our vision is, and you'll see the vision of Catholic Charities is to solve the problems of New Yorkers in need, non-Catholics and Catholics alike. And it goes through who those people would be: the neglected child, the homeless family, the hungry senior, and those we try to provide help and to create hope. And then it goes on to what our mission is. But generally what I like to do then is I always like to say afterward that our mission is actually inspired by a somewhat older mission statement. This mission statement was probably drafted about 10 years ago. And then the second page that I'm sharing with you actually is from the 25th chapter of Matthew. So this is about 2,000 years old, right? And what I always try to say to people is this is really effectively what the real mission of Catholic Charities is. And for those of you who may not be familiar with this story, this is the story of when Jesus was assembled with the disciples, and the disciples were gathered around, and they basically said to him, they said, Jesus, you know, at the end of time, what are the criteria going to be that we're going to be judged by? You know, I mean, what do we need to do in order to be able to be saved? And it's interesting, Jesus didn't really at that point mention things about belief. He didn't mention things about theology. What he did was he said this. He said, come to you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink, a stranger and you welcomed me, naked and you clothed me, ill and you cared for me, in prison and you visited me. And the righteous then answered and said, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you ill or in prison and visit you? And the king says in reply, and I say to you, whatever you did for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it for me. So in essence, what I do is then I ask the people gathered around the table, is there an organization that they're aware of? Now mind you, they probably work for Catholic Charities at that point, about a month or so. They kind of remind you of what the criteria, if you will, what the indicators that Jesus gave was. And the right answer should be yes, right? I mean, hopefully they kind of do it. And then hopefully, Catholic Charities does remind them of that organization. Because really, ultimately, that's what our goal is. That's what our goal is to attempt to do, is we try to live out those values of Matthew 25. We try to be the organization that does feed the hungry, that does welcome the stranger. You know, so often a major portion of the work of Catholic Charities is the immigration department. We have a massive immigration department. We welcome both immigrants and refugees, and we try to advocate for the policy matters too. And a lot of times people, when you go out to the parishes, sometimes Reverend Rivera, if you go a little upstate, this is where you get the questions. And when you go to the parishes, they say, why does Catholic Charities get so involved with the immigration issue? And then the answer is always, gee, I don't know. And then if you open the Bible to Matthew 25 and you see the place where it says, you know, I was a stranger and you welcomed me, it kind of is fulfilling what the mission of Jesus is. So in essence, what Catholic Charities tries to do is it tries to wind up living out, you know, that mission in the world. And the way that we do that, we also wind up sharing, as I mentioned before, the social teachings of the Catholic Church. And I'm just going to, if you will, hand out a list of these social teachings. And here there are actually 7 themes of Catholic social teaching that we wind up sharing with our folks. These themes were developed in the year 2000 by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. If you will, these are sort of Cliff Note versions of what the teachings of the Catholic Church are. Now, what was mentioned before, I know Reverend Rivera went into a little bit about the Pentecostal Church. The Catholic Church would be a little bit different. The Catholic Church is what we call an apostolic church, right? And so what the Catholic Church believes is that we believe that we trace our foundations back to Jesus and the original apostles, and that when Jesus kind of left the earth, what he did was he left the original apostles, who today we would call bishops, in charge of the church. And that in charge of, if you will, in the place of St. Peter, who we believe was the head of the church, we now have an occupant who we call the Pope, right? And does everyone know who the Pope is? What's his name? Pope Francis, we like him, right? We want to be sure he sticks around for a long time, because he really does great PR for us.
Do you ever not like them?
I will be glad to meet you guys afterward, and I will share with you some other insights perhaps, but yes, we always respect the Pope. We especially respect Pope Francis. because we think he's doing just a marvelous job of kind of representing these Catholic values in the public square. And what these values are, they're drawn from basically two sources. They're drawn from both the biblical perspective that we share with our other Christian and Jewish brothers and sisters, from both what Christians refer to as the Old Testament or the Hebrew Testament, and also from the New Testament, or the Testament of Jesus Christ. But also, we have what we believe is church tradition, which is the 2,000-year living tradition of the church. And that is not just what we would refer to as the magisterial teaching, which is the teaching that's revealed by the Pope and the bishops together, but also the life of the church. The life of the church began in the Acts of the Apostles, right? The Acts of the Apostles details what the original disciples of Jesus did and how they gathered together and they cared for the widows and the orphans, and they kind of shared all their goods in common. And really, through the life of the Christian church throughout the past 2,000 years, whether it's the lives of the saints or it's the lives of religious communities who've kind of risen up and did that work, take care of orphans and do that other kind of thing, we believe that all that together, church tradition, also informs what these 7 principles of Catholic teaching are. And then the question becomes, well, how do we wind up go about kind of living out this teaching in the world? And then this is the last sheet I'm going to wind up sharing with you. And this, when you see it, is not a reflexology sheet because it's got 2 feet on top of it. That's what it kind of looks like. What this is basically, we call this the 2 feet of Christian service. And what the 2 feet of Christian service is basically how we at Catholic Charities go about living out our Catholic Christian faith in the world. And we do that 2 ways. We do that first by acts of charity, which is helping individual people live out or recover from difficulties that they may be suffering from. For example, feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, protecting children and youth, strengthening families and resolving crisis, supporting physically and emotionally challenged, and welcoming immigrants, refugees, and strangers. So we do that part. We wind up providing help for individual people or individual families in need. But if we just do that, right, we're only doing Band-Aid solutions. What we need to do is we also need to do that second step. What we need to do is we need to do what we call acts of justice or creating hope. And there's various numbers of ways we wind up doing that. We do that, first of all, through educating voters. We do these programs in parishes called faithful citizenship programs prior to presidential elections. They're nonpartisan, but what we do is we try to raise issues that may be of importance, and we try to share Catholic social teaching about those issues. We also, for people who come to Catholic Charities for assistance, if they're eligible to vote, we make sure they're registered to vote because we believe people should participate in the society in which they exist. We do that through public policy advocacy, both on a state, city, and national level, through advocacy organizations such as Catholic Charities USA or the New York State Catholic Conference. We also work with different campaigns. For example, our office here in the Archdiocese is both a locus of Catholic Relief Service, which is the Bishops' Committee nationally that does the work of Catholic Charities in 89 countries across the globe, be it Africa, be it Latin America, be it Asia. And we wind up doing that in the developing world. And we also work with Pax Christi International, which is the International Catholic Peace Movement. And they do a lot of work down in the United Nations because we're in New York, we can follow that too. And last thing is we always also encourage people to ask how and why questions, to investigate causes of poverty and injustice and try to investigate the root causes of the problem. So in essence, what we try to do is the area, the component where we try to educate the people who work for Catholic Charities with these documents is what we call our Catholic identity. As I had mentioned, our executive director always says that we don't assist people in need because they are Catholic. We'll help anyone who winds up coming in. In fact, the Interfaith Center of New York has been very gracious to us in that we've done a number of projects and programs with them where we paired Catholic parishes and Catholic community groups with local Muslim mosques and community groups, and we did various programs and works together that kind of brings together Catholics and Muslims on sort of a grassroots level to be able to get to recognize one another, appreciate one another, and get to know one another, to try to work to build peace. In fact, it's funny, Pope Francis, we mentioned him before, has called this sort of dialogues of encounter. And he encourages Catholic parishes throughout the world to do these particular programs. I was blessed to be able to go to the Vatican about 2 years ago to be part of a Catholic-Buddhist dialogue that we actually met with the Holy Father, where he encouraged Catholics and Buddhists here in the United States to wind up getting together. And I'm pleased to also report that we are about 2 years into the project, and we've been meeting with local Catholic leaders and local Buddhist leaders to see if there's something that we can also do together, perhaps in the housing area or in the area of hunger, to be able to bring both of those communities together to be able to kind of make our city more livable. What Henry had mentioned before, so often we delve in the area of belief, and a lot of times I think a lot of the encounters between our various organizations, and certainly the Catholic Church has been involved with these encounters as well, where some of the encounters could be very difficult. But I think if you wind up concentrating on the level of what we are called to do as church, how we're called to help feed the hungry and clothe the naked and do those other kinds of things, I think that there is a great deal that we can all do together. And I really see that this is going to be, from my perspective, sort of where the life of religious people within the city is going to be going in the next dozen years or so. So that's basically it.
Thank you. We will have like a definite, absolute hard stop at 12:20 to respect our panelists' schedules and also our lunch break. But that gives us almost half an hour for questions, conversation. Any questions that come out of our panelists' presentations, very specifically about their work or their communities, or also, anything kind of lingering from our earlier conversation with Maury Davis, if you wanted to, run it by local Christian clergy and community leaders. I'm done. It's your turn. Yes, Catherine.
I love the phrase urban missionaries. And I teach in an urban school in Louisville, Kentucky, and most of my students are students of color. And I appreciated you when you said, I'm redefining what a missionary is. Could you say more about that? Because as a white person, I realize that's a very dangerous position to put myself in, and I have to always check myself and how I am inadvertently exerting power over my students of color, and have to be very conscious of that. And I guess I'm looking for more guidance or direction in how to do that without perpetuating these power structures that we are collectively trying to combat.
Yeah, I think, those of you that are white and are servicing in communities of color, it depends who your sending agency is. If you're working for a white domination or a white power structure in an ecclesial context, well then you have to be very conscious of that, of what that word means. But if you're in an indigenous community, and if you're in a politically heightened indigenous community, by that I mean that have consciousness of the historical context of the word missionary. There's that joke that when the missionaries got to Latin America, all of the Latin Americans had the land and the missionaries had the Bible. When they left, the Latin Americans had the Bible and they had the land. so that missions has been an instrument of colonization and an instrument of cultural invasion. But in an indigenous Pentecostal setting, let's say, or maybe some of the traditions that African Americans come from, if you have kids that come from holiness churches or AME churches, African Methodist Episcopal or Black Baptist churches, missionary is still an honored word. They don't have all that social political baggage that white progressive evangelicals, well, not evangelicals too much, that progressive in that is not too common. I mean, there are some progressive evangelicals, but certainly they're aware of that. But it's not the same thing in the indigenous setting. If you're working with a heightened political community of color, they'll know the history of that word. If your students are indigenous, from indigenous Black traditions and Latino traditions, to say you're a missionary is an honored thing, because they have missionaries in their Black churches and their indigenous, and they're highly respected. You understand the duality?
Yes.
So context is important. You know, in what context are you in? When I talk about missionary, I'm talking, again, I'm redeeming the word. I'm talking about it's in addition, in its intentional sense of that you see it as your mission, you know, from God. It's your calling. It's not the historical, cultural, political baggage that word has. So that I'm explaining it to my people in that context. Now, being a white person, is saying you have to be careful about the power dynamics. I think you should get yourself a person of color that's a mentor. I always tell white people, if they haven't had a person of color that's a mentor, probably subconsciously they're perpetuating colonialism. If they've never had a person of color that's a mentor. So I always advise them to have a person of color that's a mentor, because if you haven't had that, you still have some things probably that you're not even aware of that may be setting, you know, those type of messages. I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you.
I want to actually kind of throw this same question or similar question to everyone, really, because I know, like Hanna, you know, St. Lydia's, it's not at all just a white church by any stretch of the imagination, but most of the kind of founders, leaders of the church, white, progressive Christians, and then the neighborhood you're working in Gowanus is really interesting mix. It's gentrifying more recently, but also historic African-American communities in the area. So, I mean, how do you see, I probably don't use the word missionary, but the same dilemma of like, you certainly have a mission, right, as a church, and you're trying to live that out in a really diverse, sometimes racially divided neighborhood.
Right, yeah.
How do you
It's
play all
definitely
that?
something that we think about a lot. The ELCA as a denomination is incredibly white. It's elsewhere in America is much bigger than it is in New York City, but very sort of German immigrant influence still in that denomination. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that we have thought about a lot. In terms of engaging in racial justice work, we very much, on this 2 feet, we very much go to the left-hand side, the justice-making side. And I know a lot of churches and other organisations do great work that fits on the right-hand side, but we very much see our mission more on the left. And the way that has manifested is, so the church has moved around a lot over the 8 years. When you're a small and a new congregation, you don't have much money. That's kind of what happens. But just over 3 years ago, we got our own space, our storefront, in a neighborhood that we hadn't been in before in Gowanus. And so the first thing that the pastor and the congregation did at that time was to try to get to know the neighbors. And Gowanus is a very changing neighborhood. It's going through a process of rezoning at the moment, and gentrification is probably going to just peak as they, at the moment, zone as an industrial area, which means that they can't build those fancy condos there. There's a height limit and all that kind of thing. At the moment, the city council is pushing through a rezoning plan, which will mean that the developers can move in and build all the condos. And so even in the 3 years we've been in the neighborhood, it has changed a lot. And there are 2 large public housing units nearby, and one of the main things that we've done is try to get to know folks that live there, and become involved in local organisations that have been on the ground for a long time, who are already experts in the work, and a little bit, like you said, go to them for leadership, to show up, to support, but not to try and sort of move in and take over the work. And it's been a slow process, but it has been really good to get to know the neighbours. And one of the organisations that we primarily work with is very local to Gowanus. It's called Fury, which is Families United for Racial and Economic Equality, and it's led by women of colour who live in public housing. And they are very involved in the current rezoning argument that's going on. And so we've been part of the Hawaii's Neighbourhood Coalition for Justice, which is made up of lots of local organisations trying to help trying to persuade the City Council to consider the poorest and most vulnerable residents in the neighbourhood when they talk about the rezoning. Yeah.
Could you just repeat what FURE stands for again?
Yeah, it's Families United for Racial and Economic Equality.
It sounds like on an institutional level, taking Reverend Rivera's advice and allowing your church as an institution to be mentored by, local grassroots organizations led by people of color who've been working in the community for many years, and allow that relationship to shape your work.
Right. I wanted to make one more comment because I don't want my words to be misinterpreted to our sister back there, and that is, you don't have to be apologetic for being white. In other words, some people are so timid. People of color are the most welcoming, gracious people that you'll have. So, there's prosperity, white pastors exploiting the hell out of communities of color, and they're accepted. So this whole thing about being afraid to be accepted, certainly the other side is not being afraid of being accepted. They're pastors of some of the largest communities of color, mega churches, and if you turn on some of these religious stations, they're asking for millions of dollars a year, and it's mostly communities of color sending in these millions of dollars to white prosperity preachers. So this thing that somehow whites can't be accepted is also a myth, so you don't have to be afraid of that. You can come into a neighborhood and there's a certain transcendent context in communities of colors themselves that will accept your leadership if you're authentic, if you come in the spirit of humility, if you're not condescending, because progressives, they can do everything the sister said, and I'm not saying that that's their intention, and still be condescending and paternalistic under the guise of liberalism and progressive thought. So that in and of itself, there's no magic in that formula, because I'm just as suspicious of white conservatives sometimes as I am of white progressives. It's just a different form of paternalism.
It's certainly not unique to Christian organizations.
So I'm saying you can, because sometimes in our charter schools sometimes have to be the benevolent parent, and that can be seen as paternalism. But if you have children that there's no structure in the home, that the father's all messed up, the jail, that the mother's all messed up, well, sometimes what they need is regimentation, what they need is structure, what they need is a role model that kind of takes. So it's not being afraid of that, but it's doing it in a way that connects to their existential reality, not from top bottom, but incarnational. You're there with them, but that doesn't mean they're not going to accept you just because you're white. Does that make sense? That's what I'm trying to communicate with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, man.
This is a question for all of you, but as a teacher of a very heterogeneous student population, one of the things that I'm noticing is that more and more of my students are claiming to be atheists or not believing and
what city, what community?
San Francisco, California.
San Francisco.
And the Bay Area, yeah. And when we start talking about this, a lot of it is based on them calling, I guess, BS on a lot of the what they know to be I guess the gospel of all these different religions around, especially with Christianity, right? Religions around the message of this kind of bounding together across kinship, ethnic identity, and self-interest, right? With the words of Jesus or whatever, but then seeing how that doesn't kind of play in a what's the word? Well, no, in the economic
situation.
I'm spacing out the word. Money. Yeah, but our economic system, capitalist. In a capitalist system like ours, so they're seeing all these
that was like a fish trying to remember the word for water. So
what my question is, how how do you address this? How do you, like, without obviously sounding preachy or like, you know, or devaluing their
I think Manny's asking the question that we're all sitting here thinking is, how does that reconcile? This beautiful passage that you handed out from Matthew, how does that piece ever reconcile with the political paradigms that we're living in to draw, you know, it's everything and help the poor and
because they see this,
the AIDS.
Well, I think from the Catholic perspective, certainly, I know one of them, one of my favorite saints is St. Francis of Assisi, and one of the things he told his followers was he said, go forward and preach the gospel always, and he said occasionally use words. So I think from that perspective, I think that's why, I mean, at least for myself, and I'm talking here as a practicing Catholic Christian, my work for Catholic Charities really embodies or lives out my belief, because I really see that as being sort of the goal. I always believe that you have to look where the rubber hits the road, and so therefore if you look at an institution and it's not living up to what it preaches, you know, as I said, when we handed out Matthew 25, that's why I said with trepidation before, and I mean, usually people who are working for Catholic Charities get this, but when I hand the reading out, and I ask someone else to read it, I don't want to be the one talking, but when I say, does anyone know of an organization that lives out these values? And I say, I hope they do, but I mean that sincerely. And I think that I would even say our board feels that way. It's our executive directors feel. I think the Cardinal would feel that way, right? I think therefore we have to live out these values, because if we're not living out these values, then what the young people you're addressing are saying, that they're atheists because they don't see these in practice. Well, I think that we do risk that, right? Because I mean, these are the things we espouse. If we're not living out what we espouse, I think then you know, the younger people looking and calling BS on it, I think is accurate. And I agree, in these political times it is very difficult in this kind of a circumstance, because today, I was just mentioning to Hanna before, it was very interesting. There was an article that was published in the Jesuit magazine that basically is sort of like a mouthpiece for Pope Francis, where he had mentioned, or the magazine had mentioned, that they called it an ecumenism of hate that seems to be evinced in the United States. And that's strong words. The Vatican usually doesn't speak in such strong language.
Encyclical would
never say this, but they would call it an ecumenism of hate. In other words, sort of like there seems to be a balkanization against the other, be it the immigrant, be it the person who's LGBT, be it you know, anyone who doesn't see things exactly the way, let's say, that the people in power see things. And I think that is very concerning. From a Christian standpoint, I think it's very concerning. That's why, you know, what we try to do is we try to educate people in the parishes about these issues. And I think from that perspective, if you really look at the Catholic social teaching sheet I handed out, there's no way you could look at those principles and behave in the way that some of the people in leadership here are behaving. I just think that would be an impossibility from my perspective.
Yeah, this question is for Hanna, but I'm learning about your faith, but I read an article several years back in the New York Times about this movement in Europe, in Belgium, about how people are coming together in new formations of religious formations where you share meals, right? And it was someone to like keep the sustainability or the viability of these faith communities. And I was wondering, you know, if that's part of what informs the way you practice your religion or your form of Christianity, and whether or is it something that is very common amongst people from different congregations within your denomination?
Yeah. So as far as I know, St. Lydia's is unique within the ELCA as a dinner church. I know that, you know, Christians have been gathering over meals for 2,000 years. You know, since the Last Supper was, you know, the first Eucharist was around the Passover meal. And the way that Christians have traditionally seen the Eucharist or communion is as a feast. But over thousands of years, the feast has been reduced to come. And so by gathering around a full meal and showing the Eucharist as part of that, that's kind of a way of coming back to that. I wasn't aware of the places in Belgium.
Well, it was very interesting because he was talking about how amidst all the secularism, there's all these movements of people that are trying to come together in new ways in terms of practicing religion, what is religious faith, and centered around meals. Very interesting.
Can I also ask you, beyond the dinner church model specifically, and one of the reasons that I was really excited to invite, and I'm delighted that Hanna could join us and share a little bit about St. Lydia's, is that I think it's, I don't know if you guys use this term, but it's part of this larger trend that's sometimes called emergent church, right? Of people in both liberal and evangelical Protestant denominations. There's this real kind of mood of experimentation, of like figure out new ways to do community, new forms of liturgy. So I don't know if you guys see yourself as emergent church exactly. Maybe you could say a little bit about that kind of experimentation going on.
Yeah, I don't know if St. Lydia's would use that terminology, but I think it kind of fits. Where I'm from in the Church of England, we use the phrase fresh expressions of church. And there's lots of different kind of church plants springing up that really are geared to the context that they're in. And I think that's the key. Since our founding pastor founded St. Lydia's, people all over the country and all over the world have come to her and said, oh, help me start a dinner church where I am. And that's not necessarily the best model. We're not trying to sort of roll out dinner churches all over the world, but what we do want to do is help people figure out what works for their context. And that idea of coming together around a dinner table really does work well in New York City, and it's something that we find people are lacking here, but that might not be the same in every context. And I think the idea of the fresh expression of church or the emergent church is a lot of it, I think, is to do with reaching young people, but that's not the entire demographic of our church by any means. But Emily, our founding pastor, she grew up in the Episcopal church, and that was a place that always felt like home to her, and the liturgy had meaning to her, and the Eucharist had meaning, and it was a place that she understood and was a place of sanctuary. And then she realized that friends of hers who had no church background or very different experience of church, it was meaningless to them, or it was offensive to them, and they'd come and the words of the creed felt like kind of strict judgment, and the confession felt kind of judgmental and horrible, and the wafer and the wine just seemed bizarre. And so her approach in founding St. Lydia's was, can we create a liturgy that even if you've got no knowledge of it, it's kind of evident what it means by what we do. And in all the 8 years that the church has been going, no one's ever really come and said, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? By doing it together, the meaning behind it kind of becomes obvious as we practice it.
Question for also again, kind of what you described with your dinner church reminds me a lot of like the Jewish Sabbath, like, and the importance of again the candlelighting, the setting the time. How much of that tradition in your church does come from Jewish roots versus or in addition to the Last Supper?
That's such a good question, and it's almost impossible to disentangle them because, of course, the Last Supper was at the Passover meal. I don't think, I mean, I can't speak for Emily, but I don't think that was a deliberate part of what she was, what she was influenced by at the time. Of course, it doesn't impact. And actually, there's a very broad spectrum of belief in our congregation. So there are people who call themselves atheists who come every week, and there's also people who are Jewish who come every week, and or when they can. And so, yeah, I don't think that's a deliberate part of the work spanner, but it's certainly, it's integral to the Christian faith, the Jewish roots anyway.
I think Hanna kind of answered my question just there, but this is really for everybody. So I co-director a service learning program at a private school in Brooklyn, and I guess so this is a very practical element, but also a sort of philosophical element. So I was thinking about that phrase, like, we do because we are Catholics. People want to serve with you, coming from a secular school. To what extent do you think they would need to understand ahead of time about your particular spiritual religious orientation going into it, in order to feel comfortable. And so practically, like, would it be okay for me to send the kids?
You didn't realize you were getting volunteers.
And spiritually, how do you think through that question of sort of, you have the we and the they,
Right.
And how do you think through the issues around those programs?
Well, we have a director of volunteer programs, and we regularly have folks come in who, will either, like, let's say they have a service day. Let's say organizations will come in schools, or let's say accounting firms or something will have a service day. And so generally, if they want to come and volunteer in a food pantry or a soup kitchen, that's great. I mean, we just think, if we can provide the opportunity for people. Then we also do other programs where, for example, we also have a mentorship program where we do an education outreach program for people transitioning from homelessness into housing. And the mentorship would require 6 or 7 meetings with the individual person who's transitioning from homelessness into housing. So for the mentors, we would do more in service with them, and they would, mentors can be of any. I'm pretty sure we have some mentors who may be of no faith. We have Jewish mentors, we have people from other Christian traditions. But what we would do is we would obviously meet with them beforehand. We would give them an orientation to what we're doing. So I guess in the answer to your question, really, it wouldn't require any real orientation in that sense to volunteer. What we try to do with the employees is just so that they kind of know why Catholic Charities does what it does. As I said, we have people working for us who are of no faith. We have Jewish people, Muslim people, Buddhist people, Catholic people, other Christians who work for us too. And what we want to let them know is the motivation that we have, but we don't require them to necessarily have that same motivation. But we just think it's important that they know where we're coming from and that kind of thing.
I wanted to say that on the meal together, which is a koinonia, fellowship, a sense of community, is a transforming aspect in itself. And service, what Catholic Charities does, is also a very powerful paradigm. I think that if you, as teachers, if you take these integral parts, creating a sense of community with your students, also service, and how do you conceptualize that into a lesson plan? Or how do you, in what you're teaching, how do those elements become real in your immediate classrooms? The other thing is, I don't want to say that, I don't want to ignore personal transformation, because personal transformation, a process of self-discovery, a process where young people can actually self-awareness, because there has to be individual personal transformation also. So personal transformation, community, a sense of community, a sense of service, all of those are important, but and an integral part of what we're trying to do. But if there's a way that at the end, well, you can do all of those things and not be about systemic change. Every one of those things can happen, and you're not about systemic change. So to me, that last piece of systemic change, of how do you view the world, how do you view gentrification, how do you view that, like we're dealing with the issue of church planting. I have a church planting center that I partner with, a theologian in the city. I sit on the board with the bishop. There's a group of religious, so I know them with the bishop, and we talk about the issues of how do you deal with the issue of gentrification. Now that I'm having a church planting center and all of these white people are coming back into our neighborhoods, there are evangelical churches and even progressive churches, and to my surprise, on the micro table, even Jewish groups that are trying to reach the new Jewish person that the old Jewish synagogue cannot reach them. So they're even rethinking how to do synagogue to reach that younger population. So how do you deal with that dynamics of transformation in the neighborhood without perpetuating oppression, without displacing people? like in a very Pentecostal fundamentalist way, my right would push back and say, but Pastor, the yuppies need salvation too. I mean, why are you keeping them out? They need to, why are you always talking about indigenous? Let's talk about, how about these people coming back? Are we going to preach to them? They need the Lord too. You follow me? Because I'm always saying, I'm always critiquing that process. And I say, yes, we also have to, that population that's coming back, they're going to be helpful, they have skills that we don't have, they're going to navigate systems. When yuppies come back into that's an old term, but when these new people come back into the neighborhood, the policing gets better.
For everyone.
Everybody gets better, everyone gets better, so there's certain elements that bring, but the price of that shouldn't be displacement of all the other people that are there. And that's the tension that kind of exists in our neighborhoods. So a less personal transformation here through the liturgy, a less service, a less a sense of community doesn't result in also dealing with the systemic issues. It's really, we're kind of either we're perpetuating the status quo or we're helping the status quo. And all of these religious tools just become a reinforcement of that if it doesn't lead to systemic change. And for me, the exciting thing is that there is an emerging group of younger religious practitioners that want to do systemic change with all these three things. You can't eliminate this. And we need that because if truth be told, Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders inspired the young people more than religions did. Those movements were full of young people and they were able to speak a transcendent language that got to them more than all of our religious language for some reason. So how do we, I don't know, I'm raising more questions than answers, but I think how do we do that? Because we could have the great meals, we could do the great service, I could be preaching Christ can change your life, and the status quo still remains and still killing people on a daily basis.
Well, I need to end on killing people on a daily basis. But I really appreciate ending with raising more questions than offering answers. I really liked what Hanna said about part of your process in Lydia is being really insisting on comfort with discomfort, and letting conflicting things sit where they are. So that's where there's no way to sum all this up in a tidy bow. So like the pastor at St. Lydia's, I'll just say thank you.